Okay, right. So, hi everybody. This is I think our sixth talk this week. And we're lucky to have all these great artists and illustrators and creatives, and we have Dallas Shaw. Dallas, I guess your work came across my spectrum recently, and I don't know if it was a recommendation from Instagram or from somebody. But I'm constantly being shared or bombarded with different stuff. And it's nice to see. I try to gather people that do different work rather than it feels quite the same. So, and also, have a different breadth of work that people generate. So it's good for people to get a really diverse audience and sort of see what you do. But before we start, firstly, thanks for being here and finding the time. So we're blessed to have you. And then my first main question before we start sharing is how did you get from where you were in the beginning to where you are now?
hmm So I actually wanted to work for Disney my whole life. So knew I was an artist since I was very young, and I grew up in that era. So of course, I thought I wanted to draw the princesses. So I actually studied illustration because it was the easiest kind of path to get into the Disney art training program. Um, so I had interned there kind of throughout college. I had began working with the Disney design group right after I graduated. So my art career started in storytelling heavily and whimsy and magic, and that really shaped who I am and the artwork in general. Um, as I grew older, the company was changing, right? They started moving into Pixar. They started moving into digital. Um, and I was 2D artwork. I didn't really have an interest in training on any artwork on the computer. It just didn't feel like me. So I had taken a real love at that time as I was growing into the visuals of the fashion industry, the lifestyle industry. I was really inspired by those runway moments, and they felt so far away from who I was. From what I had access to growing up, I'm from a small town, so that always really felt very um unattainable but inspiring to me. And so I really had this kind of love of drawing clothing. So when it came time for that Disney switch, it was the perfect time for me to kind of start again. Um, and so I had to, but I had not a contact in New York. I didn't have anyone that I knew in the fashion industry. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, when I say I didn't know a single soul in New York City or in fashion, I am not exaggerating. I had to kind of figure out how I was going to make a name for myself in an industry that I've never worked in and without any help or contact. So that felt really, really overwhelming to me. So I really kind of studying on my own, like PR and marketing and who to reach to get into this fashion world. Like, even aside from art, like, how do I get in? How do I let people know I exist if I do something completely in a different industry and fashion's already hard enough to rec
Yeah.
hear a name in. So I started really studying PR and marketing and reaching out to literally anybody who would listen to me. I was emailing them, I was putting together press kits and making sure people got hard mail on their desk, and just hoping that they'd hear my name enough times for it to stick and maybe even for them to get annoyed so that they would have to be like, who is this girl? Um, Eventually it was the start of like Twitter, Instagram, all of that. And that was an amazing and major, major help for me. I was able to reach out with people directly, and people weren't really doing that at the time. Um, but the first company that I did hear back from in those reach outs was DKNY. It was the PR rep for them at the time, and she said, "Look, I know what you want to do, and you want to be a branded fashion illustrator, and we love that, and we love your background." And um, she basically said, "I have this project that I'm dreaming up in my head, and there's no budget for it. The company hasn't even approved it, but I know it's going to be amazing. And if you work with me for a year, I know I can do something here." And it's just the basic story you hear about like artists being asked to work for free, right? And you do it sometimes and you don't. And in this case, I was like, I don't know anyone, and I'm happy to prove myself here. And so I kind of said, I'll do some drawings for you and let's see where it goes. And by the end of that first year, I had gotten work for Kate Spade, Ralph Lauren, Oscar de la Renta, um, uh, I mean, you name it. I was working basically for everybody in the industry by that end of the first year. The project went so well, I ended up staying on that project for 10 years. And it was just, by taking that chance and saying, yeah, I'm willing to do it and show you what I can do, I ended up, you
Make
know,
magic.
Yeah, it really worked for me. I am one for like taking those chances when my heart's in it, and I think all artists probably are. You just have to measure how many to do that with.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, so I ended up in the fashion industry with very branded work. I do not feel my work was that strong at the time, but it was such a lesson in wow, branding is just as strong, right? My work is completely different and so much stronger now and developed. That was like 15 years ago, but um, the industry does care about your styling and how you're marketing yourself. If they're putting you with their own name, they need to be able to trust you. So that was that worked out for me understanding that part. And I've been drawing in the fashion industry now for about 15 years. Um, Beautiful luxury clients, a lot of high-end hotels have kind of brought me on as well. And yeah, that's kind of the
and
story.
do you, because we've seen other people moving to the States, and I guess I was explaining most of my work is US
Hmm.
based.
Hmm.
Even that, I worked for Tom Ford and I worked for Dior uh,
Yeah.
as a designer and as an illustrator and as a printmaker.
Hmm.
Um, and it's just it is that sort of constant pushing, 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 and then one little door has a little microscope open, and you have to kind of just look through it and work your way in. And it is a case of how you present yourself as an artist, as a creative, and being super flexible to what they do and taking lots of hardcore feedback. Uh,
Hardcore feedback. You just said it. I mean, that is.
that is that and you have to become robust to that feedback and kind of grow with it. And I think that's you become resilient, and I think that's part of the journey. But I when I saw your stuff, because there's been other little illustrators that I have seen who are much smaller than you, who work for Disney, and we've kind of reached out to some of them because a lot of the feedback I get from brands or designers, they either want Disney illustrators or they want graphic novel artists. because they
Mm-hmm.
understand the anatomy, they understand movement, they understand desire and dreamability.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Disney artists and characterized and graphic novelists have that skill that lots of people don't have. And I
Yeah.
think they maybe go too figurative or too arty and they lose that the magic of fashion. And I think that's probably where you kind of moved in. So what would be good is if you share your screen and we can see some of the
Sure.
magic.
Yeah, let me show you just a little bit about my job because I think it's just interesting to see all the different aspects, and you'll see how like my work shows up in a few different ways in the multiple things that I'm always working on. Um, so this is the reason that I'm choosing to show you this. This is an older creative deck from 1 or 2 years ago. But it kind of will help people see the overall style. I think that's really, really important. You really do have to brand yourself not only in your illustrations, but you need to kind of show your personal style and who you are and your design aesthetic overall when you're working with fashion brands. They want to know not only can you draw, but you know what the same clientele is responding to. I found that that's been most helpful for me. Um, so I always start kind of by introducing myself to companies, and I won't really talk about this too much. This is just kind of like what we just talked about.
Yeah,
Um, and then you'll start to see kind of some of my work. So if you look over here on the left, this is pretty much my styling. Like we just said with the Disney stuff, like I really believe in leaving a lot of my rough lines. I think it's beautiful. Um, I know a lot of artists really want to clean. I really love that illustrated look,
yeah,
pencil, pen. My work has 5 layers in it. So I start with pencil, then watercolor, then Prismacolor. We used it in college and I just feel like I still know how to blend that so well. Then ink and then acrylic and metallic touches over it. So even if it's a really simple piece of work like that, it's very much, it has a lot of thought and layers into
yeah,
it. Um, I think it's important to always share your statistics with fashion brands, even if they're not high. I just think it's important to show them where you're at. If you're just starting, I would leave some things out, but even if you can share with them that you have social pages, they like to know that you're going to share that, the majority of them. Um, and then I always share my previous client list almost before I share the work with them. That's something that I wanted to talk about today. Because once you're trusted within that industry as a personality, as an artist, um, that's important. The fashion industry chooses their illustrators wisely. They know that that artist also needs to represent them in store when no one's around, you know? So once you gain the trust of a lot of clients over the years, I find that it's important to share those past projects and those past names so that this client has the option to go back and say, "Hey, did you work with Dallas? What was that like?" But you're not only building your portfolio, but you're building trust. So this is kind of just some examples of brand collaborations. This is for Stella Artois for the Kentucky Derby. That was a really, really fun project. This is Louboutin on their shoe boxes. This was an illustration that was done for a Lord and Taylor collaboration. Diptyque. This is kind of just drilling in what people have known me from. You always kind of want to show how your work can be used and what you were originally known from. And I always like to kind of put in there, like, look, I can illustrate your actual product. Um, a lot of people in school would tell me, oh, the best way to reach out and get jobs for brands is to like do an illustration for them just to show them. And I don't think that's not really possible to do that with every single pitch. We've got to reach out to like hundreds of
Yeah.
people a day. Um, so I find that when you kind of put it together on a page like this and show them a couple things you can do in a creative deck or portfolio, it gets their wheels turning. They don't necessarily have to see their product illustrated to know that you can illustrate their product. Um, I've done a lot of celebrity work, um, and celebrity invitations, things like that, that I'm really careful to not show clients all of that. I don't like to be put in a box as one thing as a fashion illustrator, because for me, that narrows the amount of jobs available to me. So, I kind of like to show them some ways, oh, you can gift a celebrity, you can do a thank you illustration, we can draw them on the red carpet, but I don't like to just show one thing because the whole goal here for us is to grow, but to make money, right?
Yeah.
We're
Good.
here for the work. So, even though you want to be reaching out to clients and brands, showing examples or giving them an idea of what you can do, it's always really helpful to show them a few other things in case there's something else in the works that, uh, you don't get to know about. And then I always kind of put some of so this is a great example, like, I'm kind of also sprinkling jewelry. What does my accessory, what do they look like? And it's just like, I just find that it's really helpful to show it all together. Um, my style definitely has a look to it, which is unintentional. I do think that comes from the Disney background. Um, but I do believe it's hard for me to look at it, right? And to say, "Oh, that's my style." I think once you're so in it, you don't even realize what your style is. But I have had so many people be like, "Oh, this is so you," or "This feels like you." And I think that that's always a good thing as well, whether you're doing detailed work or jewels or illustrations of your own that people can see that. Um, I personally have launched my creative career into creative concept design. So I started doing like mood boards and designing basic concepts for people, and that kind of led into me designing physical spaces for people. So I've never really seen that become something that an illustrator
I've
could.
never heard anyone do that.
Me neither. But I realized that I was working with all of these lifestyle brands and I was trying to explain the larger vision behind why the illustrations would go with that campaign. We ended up having those talks a lot when you start working with fashion brands. As an artist, you often are called into other projects, or just weighing in on creative or palette. And then I think what's really important as an illustrator is if you're in those meetings and you're asked to be sharing those things, share what you really feel. Often you're the target market, right? So if you're telling them like, if they're asking you if it's your place, I personally really respond to these colors over these colors. Why? Well, in my Disney training, I kind of learned this. And so I've been able to design full brand concepts that are very whimsical and have been able to kind of bring my artwork into spaces. So that's been really, really fun. Um, I've transitioned that into visual direction, and that kind of goes right from where we were talking before, right? So I'm going to give you an example. So here I'm illustrating on leather jackets for a brand called Hobo. And these are painted moths and butterflies on the sleeves, these kind of bespoke,
Nice.
cool, just,
And
I
has this become quite popular because customization has become
don't know.
such a big thing now?
Yeah, but what was really cool about this is they were like, we really like your vision. And they asked me to art direct the entire campaign. So these were
Great.
some of the shots from the campaign. Um, and it was just for like, three bespoke jackets. But, I even got to do the photo editing. So when people are learning your style, this is for an hourglass campaign. So you'll see my artwork in here in a paintbrush, but now there becomes makeup included, right?
Mm.
Um, I got asked by HarperCollins to illustrate a full fashion book, and it was number one on Amazon Fashion on the day of launch. So your my career as a fashion illustrator has branched off into so many different things. And I feel that when you're sharing your eye, in addition to sharing your work and what you respond to in color, what you respond to in artwork, brands can trust you even more. Um, the the next thing that happened in my career is that I started being invited for artist in residency projects. So to work in hotels and create artwork while on property, not for guests, but just to be there. And that was something that blew my mind, quite honestly. How could I turn fashion illustration and now people are inviting me to an island to paint? Like that to me was this crazy turning point of, hold on, fashion illustration can actually launch your career into something else, something bigger that, to be quite honest, I'm not sure I even understand. I'm so in it, I'm not understanding what
Yeah.
people are responding to here. So, I started doing events and travel and workshops just kind of for fun. I really enjoyed that. So, that's kind of what I wanted to share and show you guys today because I think what's important in these fashion illustration talks is to focus a lot on reminding people that like fashion illustration isn't just this way that you're selling one thing and making money. Fashion illustration is fine art. And if you allow it to be, if you treat it that way, and then brands will follow suit, um, and start seeing things how you see it. That's what I've found to be the most fascinating,
Yeah.
being in
I,
my.
no, I think if you're, well, I guess once you're in it, things happen.
Mhm.
I worked with Justin Timberlake, doing his world tour, and that came from a lecture I gave at a university. So
Mhm.
you never know where these opportunities come up. And I think as long as you're out there always talking about what you do, share it like we're here, is this sort of sharing space. This is why I try to do it is to get to people to know other people, understand that it isn't a place that you're going to be lost,
Hmm.
and sort of because I work in education as well, and really just trying to knowledge share, and
Yeah,
and we're lucky, we're lucky to have someone like you join us as well, because I kind of it's nice, and the good thing is I guess a lot of people are willing to share, so that's
yeah.
quite a good thing, and we're quite lucky that most people say yes, and it's just I know time is so valuable.
I think the one of the things that I love to do, I speak at a lot of schools, which I don't think people understand, and it's one of my favorite things to do because, like I said, I knew not a soul in the fashion industry or, really in the art industry. If people didn't take the time to kind of tell me things, I would have been lost. But the difference is that it took me 15 years to collect all of those little tiny things.
Yeah,
And now I can help people by sharing things that took me years to learn in 5 minutes, right? I don't think it takes away. There's room for everybody. Everyone has different styles. But I do really enjoy telling people what worked for me because not the same thing is going to work for everybody else. You do have to navigate your own path.
yeah.
So, what does it hurt sharing every step that I took if one of those steps can help someone else?
Yeah, and I guess there's a combination because from other people speaking and hearing from you, and even for myself, is a combination of leap of faith. So a little bit of faith in DKNY and saying, okay, I'm going to do this, even if I'm not going to be paid. I'd be mindful that there's a journey and a transition, and so it's a combination of surviving lots of leaps of faith, um, giving good time and opportunities to others, and sort of like and kind of just go with it rather than uh, become bogged down with being an artist and procrastinating. There isn't time to procrastinate. You need to survive. And it was really good earlier. You were talking about we need to earn money, we need to make a living. And I think
Yeah.
that's paramount to being a professional rather than it's all about being free. I think we should be thinking about this sort of earnability and how do we live and survive. And I think, it's great for you to talk about that. And it's really nice that you spoke about Disney because, I was brought up in the Disney era as well. I guess many people have been brought up in the Disney era. I'm not too sure about now, but I think I'm a 77 baby, so my era's sort of
I'm 80.
yeah, so
Hmm.
Disney was a massive part of our culture moving through. And I guess the magic of Disney and everybody thought of who to work for was probably Disney as a young creative, even if you were going to be an artist or whatever you thought. And your parents probably said, work for Disney, you know.
Well, that's the thing. I think the biggest thing is my parents, my family. It's hard for you to wrap your mind around art jobs, right? But when you see or when you saw at that time Disney animators being so big, it's a tangible thing, right? Like those movies, the
Yeah,
books. So it's easier for people to understand. And I think a lot of people found that to be like, oh, that's the safe job, not realizing that that would be impossible to do. Like
yeah,
1 million people want to do that. But I do think and I still work with the company in the way that I probably wanted to work with them originally, right? It just took me full circle. I got to turn Cinderella into a fashion illustration for the launch of the live action film. And
wow.
it was Cinderella in my style. And, they used it on like Disney blogs and sharing and just, but I was like, how cool is this? Like, what a full circle moment. So yeah, but I'm very thankful. Like, Disney
pour qu'il y
shaped
ait
my entire career. It
illustratrice, là.
shaped my
Pour Disney avant.
entire
Il s'est
style
lancé
of drawing,
en
right?
train de
Without even
caméra.
trying.
Yeah, I was just muting someone. Anyway, so I don't know if anyone had any questions, if they wanted to fire some. I can see, so let's have a look. What advices would you give to a junior live event artist? Any thoughts for a junior?
Yeah, absolutely thoughts. If you wouldn't mind telling me what kind of live events, I can give you like the real.
She's here, I can
Um,
see her.
Maybe I can speak then. Hello, this is Anuka. I asked the question. I would say, uh, live event when you have to paint the portrait or the silhouette of the client for, I don't know, a launch of a new product. That's what I was thinking.
So the first thing that brands value at live events is speed. What brands are not realizing is that at those VIP events, not everybody wants a drawing, right? But in their minds, they're like, how many can you do? Everybody's gonna want one. And you're like, well, unless you're a speed artist, and that's a very specific thing, it's like, calm down. So if you can figure out, so like for me, I always tell brands, oh, I can do something between 10 and 15 minutes. And then I'll always explain to them, it depends on the level of detail. And I'll also give them an option for smaller paper to make it faster. But you have to be really specific in what you're promising those brands.
Mhm,
Um, so you always want to share with them, hey, generally, this is what I do, and this is how long it takes, and you show them an example. Um, you want to show them an example of something that you think is good.
mhm,
Instead of being like, or I can do this or this or this, they get like a little overwhelmed because the people you're working with for those brands are usually in PR. So once you overwhelm them with options for a live event, they then are overwhelmed because they don't know what you're talking about. So always present them with, oh, I can do something like this between 10 and 15 minutes. And then all you say is, of course I can do more detail, or we can figure out how to make it faster if that's important, and kind of leave it at that. Um, don't overwhelm them. I usually tell clients now I can do 10 to 15 minutes um, or something faster. The hard thing about promising something faster is you are allowing no time for good work. You're not allowing any time for mistakes, and you're not allowing any time for breaks. You're just um so I think it just depends on that would say that's I would go that route. And then in terms of like taking on more brand deals and in store, it's really interesting. Like you could just start local wherever you are. Chances are, like almost every time I do an event, somebody is there from another event or a planner that you meet. And that's kind of how you start getting hired for those. Inevitably, teams change. So, for example, I've been doing live events for Dior for like 7 years. Well, their whole events team is gone as of this year. Like, a whole new team. They have no idea who I am. So you can't rely on like one team. But lucky enough, people have come in and out of those events from other brands that know the work. So the other piece of advice is kind of just take on different stuff. You never know what's going to come out of it. Um, and live events are really fun. Like it won't feel like you're creating anything fancy, but it will feel like you get to play a little because you're forced to do it really quickly. Um, I don't know if that really answered
Yes,
your question,
yes, yes. Thank you so much for
but
these
I,
precious advices.
yeah. Um, And working with fashion brands in live events comes with like a lot of perks. You go home with a lot of free things. So it's really fun.
True, true. That's very nice. That's very cool.
That's all.
that's the bonus of luxury
I'm
events.
only working in
Yeah.
this career for free things.
Yeah. I think well the other interesting thing you mentioned there about free things is sometimes I had the experience of people trying to pay me with the things. So
Uh-huh.
which is
Uh-huh.
doesn't pay bills, but it's
Yeah.
nice if you get a whole load of YSL stuff. But that doesn't it's not sustainable, but it's
It's
nice
not.
once every so often.
It's not, and it's hard because once a brand knows that you'll work for trade, they will offer that again. And you know how that art thing goes, where when you give somebody something and then you tell them the price, it almost makes them angry. And you're like,
Yeah,
why are you getting angry when I'm just giving you my pricing? So I feel that if you are going to do something for trade, it has to be something that you really truly love and would buy yourself, or you're really making it clear with the brand. So like once I remember Louboutin was doing an artist something, it was so long ago, but they were asking artists to draw on shoe boxes and then they were gifting them the shoes. And I was like, but they wanted multiple shoe boxes done. You know what I mean? So I was like, having the shoes for one of these pieces does make sense for me. I want to shoot the artwork and the shoe for my portfolio. This actually makes sense. But it doesn't make sense to have multiple pair. Like, what am I going to do with these? So I kind of said, hey, actually having one pair does make sense if I and you would be open to sharing it. But would you be paying, I would need to ask for payment for the other two. And immediately they were like, that makes sense. So, and then they did come back to me with another only paid project. So I think if you're offering things that make sense as a counter, especially if it's somebody that you truly love, I love Louboutin. I love how they work with artists often. I really respect that. And Louboutin is they're very much like, do what you want. Like they're one of the only brands that I've worked with that's like, no, whatever. There are no rules. Pay whatever you want. Like that's really cool. Other brands that I've worked with are not like that. So I was like, oh, I think it's actually beneficial for me to start working with them and I can do what I want on this. So in that case, it did make sense for me, but I don't really take on any trade work at the moment, but I probably would be willing to if Chloe called me. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah. It depends on how much you really want it, and
true.
also if it's a gateway in. I think that's
It's
the
a
other.
gateway in, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the bit you have to make clear that it's okay for you to get this one time offer, but next time is this, and because you don't want to set up bad systems, bad foundations, and I think
No,
that's important.
yeah, you can't set up bad systems or foundations. I think the other thing that you really need to be careful about when a lot of companies offer you trade, it tends to suggest one of two things, that is like an intern checking a box of giving X amount of product for work, and they're not really aware of what you do at all. It also kind of suggests that instead of artwork, they're trying to throw you into an influencer box. And once even though you're an artist, they've thrown you into an influencer box, the artwork doesn't seem to be valued very much. So I think that's also kind of something you want to watch out for when people are trying to convince you to do work for trade products. It's often something that won't pay off in the future.
Yeah, good, good. Thank you, Dallas. And we tried to keep these short, and I know you've got a life to lead as well. But thank you for your time, and we'll keep in touch and we'll send you some of the links of the stuff. And, we do lots of books. So maybe I'll hook up with you as well because we publish books about talks, events that we do. And we'll be in contact because you've
Yeah.
got a great amount of stuff.
Thank you. I would really, really love that. So I appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so
Have a
much.
lovely day. Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
Aaron.
Thank you.
Talk to you
Bye-bye.
soon. Bye.
Bye.